Welcome to Formed, where each week we navigate a relevant topic or question through honest conversations. We are three pastors with three different backgrounds on staff together at Irving Bible Church in Irving, Texas. We believe we are constantly being formed in the way of Jesus for the sake of the world, and we hope this podcast helps with that. So let's jump into this week's episode of Formed. Welcome back to another week of Formed, and we're here.
Here we are.
We're on the couch.
We're back.
Yes.
Guys,
Green couch.
we had breaking news like 30 minutes ago.
30 minutes ago.
A big
I
engagement.
did see this. He doesn't know.
A big engagement happened.
Come on, guess. Can you guess? Big engagement. Big engagement.
One of the most famous people in
Significant
the
to you
whole
as well.
world.
Taylor Swift is
Yeah.
engaged.
There you go. Travis and
wow.
Taylor.
Yeah. It's big time.
All right. I'm going to not say anything about Travis, but I'm not sure
I'm kind of in the same boat.
Yeah, I mean-
I agree with various
I
sentiments.
will say I know more about his football career. I don't know much about their relationship off the football field.
Yeah, I feel judgy even judging right now.
exactly.
But
That's the
But
way I
either way,
feel
it's
too.
like a royal wedding
Hey,
that's going to
yes.
happen.
It is.
Congratulations to them. That's awesome.
Yeah. So we're not talking about that engagement
Nope.
today on the show. We could pivot if we wanted to, but we're going to talk about small church and big church. And I grew up in the first memory for me was like this tiny little brick church in the country of Kentucky, and pews, small Baptist church, going to this tiny little Sunday school, and that was like it was 50 people, maybe 60 people. That was my earliest memory. And then it felt like as I started to get older, the churches started getting bigger of the ones I went to. But how about you guys? Like, because there's so many opinions about like small church. You know, if you attend a small church, you got this opinion of the big church. And then some people would go to a more attended, a bigger church. They're like, I could never do the small church type of thing. What was your earliest experience?
Yeah, mine was I grew up in the same church all the way up to college, and then even a little bit after college. 50 families, some of whom were related to me, some of whom weren't. But all of us, just because it was such a small church, it really was like a family sense of belonging that we had there. I think also with that, and it's hard to like sort of parse out the two. It was an Indian church, and so there's a lot there in terms of cultural identification as well. So, but yeah, I've always, most of my church experience has been in small churches.
So I think my earliest memories of church was like as an early elementary school kid in what I think was, as a kid, I thought of it as a really big church.
Yeah.
And I think part of that was I was just a really little kid, right?
Yeah.
So it wasn't a church as big as ours is now. But we then left that church when I was in later elementary school. And my dad had kind of been out of church for a while, so my mom always was taking my sister and I to church. And then my dad found this church over in Grapevine, and it was when there wasn't a lot in Grapevine. It was much more kind of that small town vibe, and so much smaller church. But my dad developed this relationship with the pastor there, and so we got involved. And so a lot of my really formative years were in a small to medium-sized church that was kind of growing through those years, even as that area was growing and expanding.
Yeah, that's kind of how I was when I left Kentucky, where I was in high school. Church I was really involved in was like 800 to 1,000.
Wow.
And that was like one of the bigger churches in our there in our area in Kentucky. And then it's like I go to college, go to Liberty, and then DTS, and it's like some of these churches in Dallas. It's like, what is this?
Yeah,
Like
Kentucky
spaceship?
wouldn't know what to do with this. Yeah.
I know. I was like, this is like our whole state. I
Yeah.
was like, what is in one building? But
Yeah, like we're a big church compared to churches outside of DFW.
That's right, yeah.
But inside DFW, there's
We're
churches
just-
that are considerably larger than ours is.
how does like your background with church kind of form your opinion on the size of different churches?
Yeah, I think especially this is true for me. So let me not make a generalization, but I do think it has an impact on how you think about church in terms of what you value, maybe even what you desire and long for. So I think about my experience in church. And because I grew up in a small church, I really value that sense of, I want a place where I feel seen and known and valued. And I think that's just a human longing. And so I think we all want that. But that kind of sense of deep relationship and connection, which I think you can have in a big church. I just think you have to be much more intentional about that. But that sense of family, like I still look back at that church that I grew up in, that my parents still attend, and think, those people are my family. So many years later, they still play a really important role in my life. And so that sense of family, that sense of belonging. I also think what's so unique and special about small churches is no one can be a spectator. Like you all have to play a part, because for the work of the church to go on, you have to be part of that. So there's this sense of ownership that I think is really important. Again, I think you can have that in a big church. I just think small churches sort of lend itself to that. And so I think because of that, it really has impacted, I really want those things wherever I go, and that's part of what I'm looking for.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important even in having this conversation that we recognize, like, there are trade-offs either direction, right? Like there are some things that are really beautiful and virtuous in a smaller setting, and that can be sometimes romanticized, right? There's like this sense of, on the one hand, like, great that I grew up in a church where everybody pretty much knows everybody. There's something really beautiful and meaningful about that. That also can become sometimes a barrier for new people coming in and kind of getting integrated into that. In a big church like ours, it can be hard to find your people in that sense of belonging and community. And so the recognition that there are trade-offs in both, and to be careful not to kind of get into a mentality that sort of sees one as good and the other as bad, one is superior, the other is inferior. Both have its strengths and both have its, I think, significant kinds of limitations.
That's kind of what I want to do next, is do the pros and cons of both. Because I want us to do that, because it feels like for sometimes it can be a right or wrong. Like this way is the right way to do church, this is the wrong way. And it's more of that, however you want to do pros and cons or strengths and weaknesses, so we can show that both sides of that has its pros and cons. Let's start with small church.
I mean, one of the things that I love in terms of my memories of the small church, both the one that I mentioned that my family went to in Grapevine, and then my experience in the little town of Mart, where my grandparents lived, and was very connected there, and then spent a year of high school down there, and like the fellowship hall and the ability to just share a meal together as a church. Like, we just did a meal on Sunday for our family weekend. But for a church our size to have a meal together is a big deal. It's really complicated. And there was just something really beautiful about the old church potluck and the ability to share a meal together like that. There was this sense of when something was going on in your family, if you had a death in the family or something else that was, a struggle that was happening, kind of everybody knew and really sort of naturally rallied around and supported. And in a larger church like ours, sometimes those sorts of things can sort of slip through the cracks. And then I would say, just for me as a pastor, like, one of the real challenges that I feel as a pastor of a large church is my wiring, my temperament, my desire is to want to really do that relational pastoring of people, to be the pastor that shows up whenever there's a challenge, a crisis, a conflict, some kind of issue. And with a church our size, I simply can't do that for everybody. And sort of owning that limitation for me as a pastor has been one of the things that's been a hard adjustment, is that I actually, part of my pastoral responsibility is then entrusting that pastoral care to our other pastors, to our deacons, and not to say that I don't do any pastoral care, but that a lot of that has to be delegated to other people in order to really pastor the whole church.
Yeah, I think the only things I would add to that, and I mentioned this earlier, is in a smaller church, you each have to play a role, right? There's no one that can just sort of sit back and, well, I'll just wait for someone else to do it. And I think that's really good, to have that sense of ownership, and here's what I contribute to the church. And then the other side of that is, because it's small, when there's a conflict, at least this is what I've experienced, it can really blow up the church. And so that becomes
people taking sides.
Yes. So that's the other side of, you have this deep connection, but then this is what can go wrong as well. So there's both.
I know I guess this isn't a pro, I guess, or a con of like sometimes burnout with like the pastors of smaller churches.
Yeah.
I think of a friend of mine, Kyle Boone from DTS, who goes to pastor this church outside of Cleveland, and it's super small church. And I remember a few years into it, me and him talking, and he's like, dude, I've been at the hospital today. I've also been on top of a ladder changing the lights in our like sanctuary.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to figure out a social media post to invite people. And it's like he's playing like all these roles
hats,
and just putting in a crazy amount of hours.
Yeah.
But that's kind of the small church
Right.
life in
Yeah.
that. And he loves it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, you have more limited resources as well, right? So that's good.
so let's go to the big church. Pros and cons of a big church.
I think you mentioned just at the last there, resources. I mean, one of the things that we have in a church our size is a considerable amount of resource to be able to invest in kingdom work. That we're able to make a global impact through our partnerships by being able to mobilize financial resources around the world. We're able to make a local impact by mobilizing not only financial resources, but also mobilizing people. We've got a lot of people that we can rally to address needs within our community. And so I think that's one of the things that certainly throughout my time at IBC has been a real sense of one of the things I love about this church is this is a church that's doing a lot of good in the world.
Yeah.
And we're able to do a lot of good in the world precisely because we are a larger church that has the resources to be able to do that. So that's one that immediately comes to mind.
Yeah, farther reach, right? Yeah. I think maybe the additional thing I'd add there is with more resources, it doesn't necessarily mean there's a diversity of people, but there's certainly a broader experience of people, right? So that's there. And then I think with the resources comes perhaps more opportunities for ministry programming in terms of what you might be looking for that fits you. So I think that's there as well. Now the downside of it in a larger church is if you don't want to be known, you don't have to be, right? You can just show up here on a
That's a pro
Sunday.
for some people.
Right, that is. Every time we do the thing where like, okay, introverts, you have to say hi now. I always think about, there are people that I actually just want to come here and I want to leave, but you're missing out on the beauty of the church when we do that, right? So there is an intentionality that's required if you want to go deeper in relationship.
Yeah, I mean, again, even one of those things that's two sides of the same coin, like in a larger church, we have specialized staff, people that are really gifted, that have a high level of competence to be able to take on diversity of roles, so that I, as the pastor, don't have to be thinking about the what's happening with social media, because we have a whole team of people that are working on that, and so the specialization of staff that then enable us to have these really great ministries and great programming. And then the flip side of that, like you talked about in a small church, like everybody's got to contribute. Everybody's got to do something.
Yeah.
Sometimes when you have a really skilled, specialized, well-trained staff, it can become sort of staff-centric.
Yep.
And so we really have to work hard as a larger church to ensure that we are one of the ways we talk about is giving away the ministry, right? That we as a staff are actually equipping the people of the church to do the work of ministry, so that we are having people. So in some ways, we have to work extra hard at something that comes more naturally in a smaller church. I think the same is true with respect to pastoral care. We have staff who are able, capable, have the ability to provide that pastoral care. But in a large church, you can still miss people. Things can slip through the cracks. We don't always know what's going on in people's lives, and so. That's, again, something we've worked really hard to try to create those infrastructures so that people don't wind up slipping through the cracks with respect to pastoral care.
I think that's really good, because our role is to equip the saints, and we can miss that by becoming we're the professionals. And that's such a miss in a big church, such a miss. We have such gifted people that have, there's so much opportunity for them to contribute, to make us better in so many ways that we would not be able to do on our own.
So in a lot of ways, I feel like we are a large church that is working oftentimes to feel smaller, right?
That's good.
To maintain some of those virtues, some of those strengths that maybe come a little bit more naturally for a smaller church. And I think that all of our emphasis, even this year, on this idea of belonging is part of that. Is to say we want to fight against that tendency to be anonymous in a large church, that you can just kind of come in and remain unknown and kind of sneak in, sneak out. We have to fight against that, but that's what we're trying to do. And then I think we have to fight against the tendency of consumerism, like being a larger church with the resources we have. Like we're able to create these really meaningful, powerful, attractive worship gatherings, and we want to make sure that we're doing that in a way that is deep and that is formative, and not merely sort of putting on a show.
Yep.
That's about getting more and more people through the door. The idea of inviting more people through the door is to invite them deeper into a journey of transformation into Christ-likeness, not merely to gather a crowd.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, when we did a church survey last year, a whole church survey earlier this year, and I was going through a bunch of the answers recently, and I remember this answer of someone said that over a period of time, the large church, the size of our church was daunting, but over a period of time, it felt smaller and smaller. And I think that's the type of thing that big churches should always keep at the forefront of their brain of how can you create these communities within your church to feel smaller, because that's where community happens, relationships happen. I think of something that we do in our services of praying for
the people.
Individual people in situation and saying their names. I think that right there just makes it, that part of our service takes me back to a smaller church in Kentucky. And now my church would pass the mic around. It's and somebody would talk for 10 minutes. So we can't really do that in a bigger church. But also I think one of you said the resources part too, and I think about our Rise Special Needs Ministry, and it's just how it is. Not too many smaller churches can pull off a ministry like that. And
we were able, when we did a renovation of the building, to create space from the ground up for individuals and families with special needs. And so that's something that, because we are a larger church and we have the resources, the ability to do that, we're able to offer really meaningful ministry that's hard to find for those families, including, we have our respite program that is a real blessing to families that may not actually be a part of IBC, but they're able to find that kind of care for their loved one. And that's just one of the I think real hallmarks of who we are as a church. That is a blessing that's made possible precisely because we are a larger church with the kind of resources to be able to do that. Shannon, our who kind of helped launch that ministry and continues to oversee, and now Trinity, the director of Arise. But I remember Shannon years ago saying to me that she hoped that there would be families that would move to Irving because of the kind of care and support that they can receive from Irving Bible Church. And I just thought, yes, that is a beautiful vision for our special needs ministry that is made possible because we are a larger church that has the resources to be able to do that.
Yeah. And I think it says something about what we value. And that's maybe the one thing I'd say, church size, certainly that's a factor. But I think one of the things I'd say is people are looking for churches. What do you value, and does the church you're looking for align with those values? Good. While I was on sabbatical, we rarely get an opportunity like this to go to different churches. And I went to some great churches, great gospel-centered churches doing such good work in the area. And yet I kept coming back to, gosh, IBC is such a special place because what I value aligns with what we're after here. And I realized that's really important. This is really important to me, particularly around our distinctives around the role of women and becoming a multi-ethnic church. That's really important to me. It's so important that I would go here if I wasn't on staff here. And so I think thinking through what do you value and does the church you're looking for align with those values? And then, is this a place where I can really grow? Because if you're just looking to sort of be that anonymous spectator or consumer, then there's something else going on here. But if you're really wanting to go deeper in life here, is this a place I can grow? Is this a place where I can contribute and serve? God's gifted me in certain ways, and the church needs that. How do I do that? And so thinking about some of those things along with, size as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah. If, let's say someone's listening to this and they've attended a larger church their entire life, and they're like, I can't imagine doing anything different for church, or I can't imagine going to a smaller church. What would you want to tell the big church person about the small church?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's beauty and strength in each. You talked about trade-offs in each, but I think there's beauty and strength in a smaller church of that almost immediate part of being, I'm going to be part of this church in significant ways because I have to be in order for the work of the church to go on. And that means I'm going to be known. And so I think that is a strength and beauty of smaller churches that you can't find as easily in a larger church. It can happen. You just have to have more intentionality.
Yeah, I think those who maybe have such a lot of experience in larger church can tend to look at a smaller church as somehow not successful, right?
Yeah.
They've failed,
Lesser,
if you will. And I think you just have to be really careful about making assumptions like that. That there can be beautiful things that are happening in smaller churches. There can be great preaching that's happening in smaller churches, great ministry that's happening, great community that's happening. And so there can be this tendency, again, perpetuated by oftentimes leaders of larger churches. Healthy things naturally grow.
That's right. Yeah.
And so there can be an assumption that if it's small, it must not be healthy.
Yeah.
And I think that healthy things naturally grow mentality is problematic in all kinds of ways, right? Because sometimes very unhealthy things grow massive and grow like
That's
cancer.
Right. That's right.
Is something that continues to grow. And so, yeah, I think we just have to be careful with that mentality of healthy things naturally grow. Therefore, don't assume because it's small, it's not healthy, or there's not, great ministry, great preaching, great community that's happening there.
Yeah, I mean, I think this could go both ways, but as far as just don't judge the book by its cover.
Right.
Of, you look at even just like outreach. I know some smaller churches that do way more outreach than some bigger churches that are like twice their size. Or it's like, man, this smaller church, they could have a decent sized building if that's what they put the money towards. Yeah. But instead, they do all the stuff in the community. But you might look at it and it's be like, oh man, that's just like you almost like look down on it as sometimes as a big church. But it's like, yeah, you can't look at it like that of a successful, not successful. Let's flip it. What would you say to the small church person about the big church?
One sentiment that I think I see with some frequency that usually, again, is perpetuated by people that are part of smaller churches thinking about big churches is there can be this kind of association with the mega churches where the pastor lives in this opulent home and drives this fancy car, and oftentimes I'm hearing sentiments about like we need to tax the churches, right? Because these big churches are just money making machines, and there unfortunately are some of those, right? And it's ugly and it's not what we want to see. And yet, I think of a church like ours, the resources that we are investing in trying to make a difference in the world and in the community, and the idea of like taxing churches. A lot of those really mega churches that are, just bringing in big bucks would continue to, even if there was a change in taxation status. It's the churches our size and smaller that would actually really harm our ability to make the kind of impact in the world that we want to be able to make an impact. And so, I guess the word of caution there is like, assuming that all churches that are big have that same kind of emphasis on dollars and
it's just all profit.
I mean, your Maserati doesn't help.
We need to go back to my Accord that I would tape together with duct tape.
I think the only thing I'd add is I think there's, and it's similar to how those that come from larger churches can look down on a smaller church experience. I think the other way around is to think that in a larger church, there's lack of depth, right? You can't actually go deep in a larger church. Not only am I not known, but you're actually not a deep disciple of Jesus, right? Like it's just sort of the superficial thing where it's all about programming and lights and smoke screen and all of that kind of stuff. And I just think, again, that's a narrative that we've created about the larger and related to the mega church idea that isn't necessarily true.
Yeah, the assumption of consumeristic church.
That's right.
And again, there are some churches that
Yeah.
intentionally tie into the kind of consumerism as a mechanism for growth, and growth is really an emphasis on numerical growth, the number of people that show up, and yet it doesn't have to be that way.
Right.
And again, we're fighting real hard not to be the kind of church that's merely about how do we get more people through the doors, but actually we want to invite people in to take them deeper on the journey of discipleship to Jesus.
I feel like this is what I've gotten the most of, is especially being here, being in Dallas. My friends back home, they're just always like, I can't imagine going to a big church like that. I can't imagine walking in or not knowing the senior pastor or not, people, I see people I just don't know. No one knows me.
Yeah.
And I have to like kind of reinforce them, like, it doesn't have to be that way though. Like our senior pastor's like at the front of the stage every Sunday.
Yeah.
Like you can meet him, talk to him, or you can know people. We have all these different ways to join these communities at the church and stuff. You might not know the whole room.
Yeah.
Right.
Probably won't, but,
Yeah.
and it's not always a concert. It's not, all these things that sometimes the stereotypes.
I remember just growing up, especially on the East Coast, we just don't have that many large churches. And hearing of churches with coffee shops, like that was a big deal. Like your church has a coffee shop? That feels like that's over the top,
Yeah.
Well, thanks for that conversation. I think it's important that sometimes there's some like really harsh opinions on both sides of that, and I think it's just a nice reminder that church doesn't have to fit in one little box. It can look different all over the place. Let's have some banter.
Let's do.
Let's have some fun.
We have no idea what the banter is.
All right. So in the spirit of small versus big, I'm gonna throw some topics here out, and you tell me what you would prefer. So would you prefer this is pretty broad here, smaller restaurants or bigger restaurants?
You mean chain versus, is that
Like
what you
a
mean?
hole in the wall place versus a large steakhouse or whatever. Like
I'm a big hole in the wall fan.
Yeah.
And I love especially one that like you feel like you've stepped back in time when you step into.
Yeah.
There's a little place over by my house that like the prices on the menu feel like they're from several decades ago.
No
And
way they can pass inspection.
Certainly the decor is from several decades ago.
Yeah.
And yet they make just great kind of down home food. I'm not going to mention the name because
Everyone's gonna go there. It's not gonna be.
I don't want them to grow and get big.
See, the more like marks you get on your inspection, the better the food is at the restaurant. All right, small airport versus big airport.
Big airport.
I kind of like a small airport. Yeah.
When you say small, I'm thinking like those regional airports where there's like not even a gate. There's just.
I don't know. I feel like I would lean bigger airports because of all the like different things you can get while you're waiting. But there was a small one on our Romania trip that's like we just landed, got out on the tarmac, like walked in, and it was it was so easy and so quick of everything, and I was like, this is kind of nice.
Jim and I went to was it Santa Barbara a few years back, and that's a smaller airport and just charming.
Oh, is that the John Wayne?
Yeah.
That little
and
airport.
so, whereas like
there's that statue there.
I'm
and
flying to
by luggage. Is that where the?
I don't know.
I don't know about statue.
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
But I'm flying to Denver in a couple of weeks, one of the biggest airports in the country. And you got to get on a train to go over here to go over there.
See,
and it's
you
just
like that?
It takes
I
forever
like it
just to
for
get out
options.
of the
For options.
Can go anywhere.
Okay, if you're going on vacation for a weekend, big city versus small town.
Big city.
Shocker.
I know.
I mean, I certainly have my love for small towns, but I would probably go big city, I think.
Okay. All right.
You thought you were going to get Barry on that.
The
You thought
best
Barry was
is when
gonna
you
go.
can get the big city and small town,
He's like, where does Santa Fe? fit?"
together. Oh yeah, Santa Fe
What
is
is
not
that?
exactly big city.
Okay, small car versus big car. And you can't be like an in-between SUV like both of you drive. I mean, we're talking like either a massive truck or like a smart car.
I can't do a smart car.
I almost bought a much smaller car.
Really?
When I got my Bronco, but my family thought that big me and small car would look kind of ridiculous, and so like you need a bigger car than that.
Yeah,
So,
that just didn't fit you. Yeah, you're
Okay.
like
I was going for cheap because I don't want to
you're
be
like,
the
I know-
pastor that drives a fancy car. I wanted
the
something
worst thing
cheap.
you could ever say to Barry is something like that. That's
Yeah.
the worst thing.
I seen too much duct tape
Yeah.
for too long
we,
out here.
we know that that's not you.
Your bumper
Yeah.
falling off. All right, I have two more. Small amount of shoes or a big amount of shoes?
Big amount of shoes.
You're the big amount of shoes,
Yeah.
guys. Yeah,
Yeah.
you got them all in boxes. Are they arranged? You put them back in the boxes.
I recently got rid of all the boxes.
Okay.
So they're just, yeah, it's pretty chaotic right now.
Oh.
But
Oh, see, I thought you would have like those clear.
I do go
Jeez.
through like seasons. I have
Okay.
like what's on rotation right now, and I'll have like 10 or 12 pairs on rotation.
Gotcha.
And then
gotcha.
I'll switch some out every now and then.
Yeah.
But
10 or 12 that are on rotation.
yeah.
Yeah. So I guess I'm probably the other end
Yeah.
of the spectrum. I think I have a lot of shoes, but partly because I haven't gotten rid of a lot of shoes. There's a lot of
Yeah.
shoes that sit and don't get worn.
Yeah. So you
And I
probably just
usually
need to
wind
clean
up
it
with a
out.
pair of boots that I will wear almost all the time. And then in the summer, I've been wearing more
Yeah.
sneakers.
I've been noticing.
But I have like
they look good.
3 pairs of those. So I don't know anything about the 10 pairs on rotation thing. Maybe
All
I
right.
need to get there.
Last one, small concert versus big concert.
What's a small concert like? Are we talking
I don't
this like amazing performer and there's just 50 of us?
I saw one of my favorite singer-songwriters I believe it was in a yoga studio with
Really?
like,
What? With
Yeah.
Brian?
no, this was so this was, do you remember the 90s band Toad the Wet Sprocket?
Yeah.
Yeah. Glenn
You start-
Phillips, the lead singer from that band, sings at lots of small venues.
Yeah.
Now they've gotten back together and gone on tour and, much larger venues, but seeing him perform in this really small,
that's
intimate
awesome.
setting was pretty cool. In a yoga studio.
Yeah.
we
I
weren't doing yoga at the time.
That's a whole other thing. Yeah. I don't think I've been to a small concert, so I think I'd probably have to say big concert. I'm not
Okay.
sure. Like, well, what would you say?
Probably bigger. I went to a few smaller ones, and if you know the music at small, that's the thing.
Yeah.
If you don't know all the music at a small one,
Right.
I felt like a little out of place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if you do know it, then
Yeah.
you feel like you're all like one big family in there.
Yeah.
It's like, yes, this is
I'm
awesome.
in. Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, all right. There you go.
There you go.
That's another week.
I talked to somebody on Sunday who's a big fan of the banter. So
Yes.
shout out to Gabe. But yeah, so we were chatting
Whoops.
about the fact that he was always enjoys our banter at the end. So,
Well, thanks for listening to the banter, and yeah, we'll be back soon.